All right, what's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Yes, we are a clothing company, but really we address the human body's natural function. We come at it through the skeletal system because the fat content can change and the muscle mass can as well. But the body has a neutral position within every joint, and it just has to reside within that. And we talk about clothing because it's the only thing placed onto the human being. If it's imbalanced, then the body will be. On an earth with gravity, pulling us straight down from our center line, the sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and then the jaw, stabilizing the entire body naturally. If there's any imbalance, then pain, damage, and the body just can't work. So it's Easter. It's actually the 20th of April, 2025. And I'll talk about the four sides of our company, where clothing sits, and then we'll get into this discussion on the wrist, and specifically the right wrist. And the dominant wrist, really, if you're left-handed, but as we talk about, clothing patterns are right-handed. The world is quote-unquote right-handed, and so the patternings within human beings are as well. Even for left-handed people, they still deal with right-handed patternings in their body. So there's four sides to us as a whole. This is the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. We do what I was just discussing. We have another fourth, which is In the Image Clothing Company podcast, with discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. I get deep and bold and real, aka the truth of all things is really what the gospel of Jesus Christ is. We have another fourth of us, which is In the Image Clothing Company music. I address sizings and setups of guitars to allow the hands, which are essentially the shoulders, just as the feet are essentially the hips, to just work and be unaltered. We also have another fourth, which is In the Image Clothing Company dogs. We let dogs stay natural. Unnatural materials, dehydrated foods, collars, leashes, there's a lot altering dogs, and we address it, okay? Clothing. For everybody. Man, woman, tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, or any time period to ever be, it's the same. The body just has to stay unaltered, so pants have to stay above the hips, so there's no alteration to the pelvis. Slightly higher in the front than the rear for the waistband angle to keep these core muscles activated by contracting. The body would always be activated as a whole unless otherwise altered. The tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to be evenly behind the little bones up here on the peak of our shoulders. Those are the other ends of the collarbones because our shoulders only ever naturally work behind our head. The edge seams of our shoulders should be right at the very edge. These ones on this specific shirt could be slightly smaller for me personally, but that's where the functionality of the shoulder is, okay? Two things we have under prerequisites when it comes to In the Image Clothing Company, because they're conditional. Ropes in shoes aren't always there. We call them laces as human beings. Tags in clothing aren't always there, but very commonly placed as of modern day. There's only one way to weave a rope across the top of the human feet and call it a shoelace without altering the functionality of the feet. That's what we call In the Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique, found where you find us on the internet or anywhere you could. With that, we have to tie our shoes evenly over toward the center line of the human being because there's two sides to the body, as we discussed. These are Vans branded shoes, no affiliation as of today or up until, but I just want to make it clear because you can probably tell what brand they are. So, yes. Tags in clothing have to be removed because anywhere they're placed, it's either causing a physical gap, changing the skeletal system's only working position, and or just not allowing musculature to activate. And then the body's trying to compensate when it can't ever because it has to all go where every part of it does. Okay? Everything plays its role in the body and it has to, otherwise it just doesn't work. So, this video about the dominant wrist, really the right-handed wrist, okay? The wrist on the right side of the body. We're going to talk about it because there's a lot going on. We talk about uneven shoe tying, something I did until I was 24, and how it rotates the entire body to the tip of the head, to the tips of the fingers, if it's not evenly over toward the inside. The only way the feet will ever work. And since it does travel clear to the tips of the fingers, it'll take that neutral wrist straight out from the pinky, as is the neutral ankle straight out from the pinky toe, and that pinky finger won't be in line with the forearm in everything we do, stemming from our feet, because it travels all the way up and out. Our wrist will be like this. It'll be out of its only neutral, and then everything we're doing in our lives will be kind of like this. Rather than the only even the human body actually has, okay? And then it can just work, right? So what happens is this wrist is huge when it comes to scar tissue and chronic patterning. I talk about the outside of this right forearm and how all the scar tissue that gets built up, clear from this elbow all the way along this bone to the hand, and then even out through the pinky, it needs to be all broken up because of this reason. But we need to focus specifically on the joint of the wrist because all this motion is happening in that joint, and it just needs to be allowed to be, because really the neutral wrist goes up and down, and I'm still working out scar tissue slightly within my body, meaning releasing it, loosening it, after years of patterning from the very things that we talk about, me being the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. And that's how I know all this stuff so deeply, is because personal experience. And it applies to every human being to ever live. The things that we talk about here under In The Image Clothing Company. This neutral wrist, it has to be mobile and just loose, and it has to be able to go both directions, and it has to be able to have all the functionality that it just would, allowing the fingers to track in line, the only way they will ever work. And there's so much scar tissue that builds up that doesn't allow the motion, because on the end of these bones that come down, there's two bones on the forearm that come down, and there's actually space in between them. When these bones come and they end here and here, what happens is, if this wrist is restricted and inhibited, there's going to just be built up scar tissue around where the ends of those bones are, because they're doing things out of a position that's their only normal, meaning not in a position that's their only normal, because the fingers have to track in line. All the muscles that work the fingers, they don't stop in the hand, it comes up the wrist. Because I play guitar, and well, right, we have a fourth of our company, In The Image Clothing Company Music, and so I've shown this before in videos. You move your fingers around and you can see all the muscles clear to your elbow inside your arm working and moving around. And so if you can't see so well right now because of the angle of the lights actually behind me, you can do it on your own arm, and just that's the case. I'm just giving context visually, because that's happening. And if the hand can't work in its only inline position, then we're doing things stemming at the foot, being tied unevenly, neutral ankle gone, travels all the way up the whole right side of the human being, and the neutral wrist is gone on the right side, or whatever side's being tied, anyway that's not evenly over toward the center line of the human being. And so, well, even this, right? I do that as a visual. After I show how to tie shoes, I use my hands like this often. That's what I've been doing. And you can't even do this when there's scar tissue between the bones. Joints of the body is just where two bones come together and have motion. And you have these arm bones coming together with the hand bones, and there's motion there. And so between those bones of the arm and the hand, if there's scar tissue that builds up in there, you'll get this clicking. And my hands are doing it, and in my case, it's not a bad thing. I understand my own body, and I'm getting out of chronic patternings But if you don't know what's going on, that can be very alarming, because there's tendons that go throughout all the hand, from the tip of each finger down to the wrist, and you can see them, and they roll around as you move your fingers on the back of your hand. It just will only ever work in line, straight out from that pinky. And you'll never be able to have an inline neutral wrist if your feet are altered. So the body only ever works as a whole. We hit that so hard, but a lot of people specialize in a specific part of the body, and people will go to hand specialists or wrist specialists and try to get their hands to work when they're just not. But if there's still things at the feet or at the hips or at the shoulders that are altered, you will never address your hand health. So, yeah, that right wrist, you just need to know that the body has neutrals. And the joint of the wrist, as if I were to just lay my arm down on the earth here, on the grass, it's straight out from that pinky. And we really need to break up all that scar tissue that's in there. And when I say those things, I just mean use your own body. And then it's not dangerous like you're using something else besides your own self. I take my left hand here, and I just work along the outside of the bone where I feel that gristly feeling of scar tissue. And all throughout this joint, it just needs to be able to move, because this outer bone comes to here, because you see this little bump on the outside of people's wrists often, and sometimes it's really excessively bumped out, and all that means is that your hand's not in its only position, and so the bones aren't lining up, because really it should be pretty well even down the arm, because that's neutral, and then from there you have both directions. So yeah, it's really big. We talk about how the pinky finger affects the entire body for this reason, right? So anything you're holding, though, we need nails on the fingers completely supporting the ends all the way to the tip of the pad, as we need nails on the toes entirely supporting to the end of the pad of the toe. If you cut them flat, then your hand doesn't roll around, and you just have that nice neutral position. And then you can round the corners so they're not sharp. So, yeah, the right wrist, it's really big. We also just, as we've talked about so often under In the Image Clothing Company content, we live in a modern man-made world, and the hands are rounded. And if we hold things that are flat, it just changes the entire body, in this case, from the hand down to the foot. And just every extremity that's anywhere as far as you could get away from the hand. And so the only way you can have a neutral, unaltered right wrist is if your hand is unaltered. So yeah, we're holding things that are flat, and what happens when your hand, I use the term hand arch, quote unquote, because we have feet arches that grip inward, opposing each side of the center line of the human being, but we also have hand rounding, open palms, and I call them hand arches because it's the same thing as the feet. The hands are so similar. There's only one difference in the amount of bones in the hands and feet, and the operation is just extremely similar. So the neutrals are both at the pinky toe and the pinky finger. What happens is when you hold something that takes that arch away because it's just flat, your hand will then just go the direction like this that's going to happen because of the other things we've discussed, meaning your hand will just drop down like this because that rounding is only allowed to happen from the neutral pinky. If the rounding in the hand goes away, the neutral wrist is gone because of just the operation of where things are placed within the hand. And so we need to do all that we can, as I've talked about so many times in past content. And it's great. We'll say it as much as we say it. It's so important. In the Image Clothing Company content is what I mean. We talk about keeping that natural radius within the hand, rounding to the hand. I play nylon string guitars, which are traditionally flat. Now your body is deactivated through its entirety. So there needs to be that radius, which is the term they use for guitars, because all that means is half of a circle is the radius of the fullness of the circle. So that rounding is in the hands, and it just has to be. So everything we hold flat, do all that you can to get some rounding to it, as we've talked about. But breaking up all that scar tissue that you can get at within the wrist so that you have both directions of every motion of the wrist without compensation in other parts of the body. So there you go. The right wrist is really the dominant side. As I talk about, there's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Choose the Right. And we went into a lot of things, but one of the big things was the right side of the body is really pretty much the only side that you ever have to do any release to as a human being. Because what I was saying at the beginning of this video, and right-handedness. So yeah, it's not the thumb's fault, and we'll talk about that as and when we do, but people have thumb stiffness, but your thumb only ever works in the position that it can while the rest of the wrist is neutral. And if the rest of the wrist, meaning this, right, coming from that pinky and the hand as these 4 fingers, if that's not in line and neutral, watch my thumb. When my hand goes out of its neutral, now the thumb doesn't do its only workings, which is up here. And so, yeah, that right wrist is huge. It's so big, dude. It's huge. There's only one way the human body works, and it just has to be allowed to. So there you go. When you put all 4 of your fingers around your thumb, this position where they're just going to meet at any rotation of the shoulder, at any part of the motion of the arm as a whole, the pinky will stay neutral. That's the only way the hands actually work. So I've given context in this video here on how to allow that to be. And thank you. Thank you. That's a hard-hitting one to me. I've dealt with a lot of it myself personally. So listen, and you've probably seen or heard me doing stuff like this on In the Image Clothing Company music. If you've seen videos from recent time as of today's date, yeah, it hits me, man. We're doing things here that will last forever. This video could be seen by somebody in 1,000 years or any X amount of time ever. And it applies the exact same to every human to ever live. God designed our bodies. They only will ever, as I say, right? There's only one way the body works. So, gratitude. Like even this, right? My hand's here on the ground. My wrist is still neutral. That right wrist. Because your left side, you're just not really using for very much, because we use one side of our body so much more than the other. Almost everybody. And when you are using your right wrist in a world that just doesn't accommodate for its only workings, then it's just getting so damaged. So, the dreaded collar seam. Look up under In the Image Clothing Company, the dreaded collar seam within t-shirts. If there's a seam in the collar and it's placed on the left, it's going to just really alter that right wrist by dropping the whole right side of the body, which is the same thing that happens from the shoe all the way up with uneven shoe tying if the right one's the one that's tied incorrect. It's as real as it gets. And there's also just weight on the right side of clothing. Zippers are often on the right, buttons are often on the right, sometimes women's designs are the other side. Coin pockets are often on the right. And oversized clothing will fall to the right, hanging on the wrist. So that's why it's specifically the right wrist, because it just is. That's just what happens. So yeah, all the things. And then you place anything into your pockets. If you're right-handed, you're probably going to use your right hand and put it in your right pocket, and then that's just changing the whole right side of your body and going to your wrist. We use our hands. I mean, if you didn't have hands, your life would be so different. They're used so much, and if they're not being used in their only workings, then they just get deeper and deeper and deeper into patterning. So it's huge, and it's as real as it gets, as we say, right? Clothing is the actual problem, and it's the actual cause. Yeah, it is. That's the same thing. I just said it two different ways, but it is. There's clothing is the actual thing causing physical pain in human beings. It just is. So yeah, right. It's only one neutral. Whether it's here, whether it's here, whether it's here, there's only one neutral to the human being. I mean, ever and always. And it starts at the foot for the wrist. Shoelacing and tying technique under In the Image Clothing Company. Never could change. It's not our opinion. There's only one way the human foot is shaped. Ideally round laces. Ideally no give, no stretch within anything within the body that we place onto it is what I mean. It's as real as it gets. Your wrist will go to your jaw. Your jaw is trying to stabilize your entire body, and if your wrist is out of its only neutral, your jaw is changed. The body only ever works as a whole. Oversized tops, just because your shoulder's altered, your wrist will be as well. So, it's as real as it gets. I could say it, and I could say it, and I could say it. I'm so excited for In the Image Clothing Company dogs. I personally will be breeding standard poodles. Yeah. Very grateful. So, thank you.